Well, welcome back to another episode of Buffalo Happy Hour. Mike, what's going on?
And Derek, we are back with our friends over at Big Ditch. Do you want to introduce yourself and potentially a title? Because I know you wear a lot of hats.
Sure. Matt Kahn, president and co-founder, Big Ditch Brewing Company.
Love it.
Yep,
President and co-founder.
That's my official title, yes. President and co-founder.
How did that whole thing start for you then? Because Big Ditch in Buffalo it's an OG. It's a big story.
Yeah. I guess I still don't feel like an OG, but, it's getting there. We've been open for over 8 years already. So how did the whole thing start? So I've told the story just so many times, but it's a story I love to tell. So back in 2011, myself and my partner, who is our head brewer and also our co-owner, we were both working in a biotech and pharmaceutical company. So we were, like, my little stupid joke is making drugs and making beer pretty similar, actually. But that's what we were doing. We were making biotech pharmaceutical materials. And we were both actually working in a lab. And he would take raw materials and they'd be come in a food grade bucket and dump them into batches to make stuff or whatever. And then throw away the bucket. Well, Corey is a very resourceful. He's he can really fix anything in our brewery. He's sort of like our facilities manager right now. But he's always been like that. But even back then, he was like, "Hey, looking at this food grade bucket, he's like, I bet I could make a fermenter out of this." So this is February of 2011, and my immediate reaction was like, "Well, look, I mean, I could go down the street and buy 500 kinds of beer. Why are we going to waste our time making beer?" That was my immediate reaction. Sure. But then thinking about it overnight, back in 2011, there were only 3 breweries in Buffalo. But I know that craft beer was growing like crazy, and I'd always loved craft beer. And more so than that, we both wanted to open our own business. We'd always wanted to be entrepreneurs. My dad actually owned his own promotional products sales business. So that night I was like, hey, maybe we could I texted him, maybe we could open a brewery. And came in the next day, and we just started writing down ideas for recipes on an index card. We had never made beer before, so we weren't guys that had homebrewed for 20 years and
Sure.
were I'm quitting my crappy job and finally doing what I always wanted to do. This was sort of hey, there's an opportunity here. It just came to us. Let's give it a try. And so we write down a few recipes on an index card, some of which we wound up actually making and commercializing or whatever. And then that weekend, we just started learning to brew from scratch. And then it took really 3.5 years from that moment and the bucket and the index card to actually opening the brewery, which we opened in October 2014. It's been 8 years since. So yeah, I mean, it was fairly early on, I guess. We were one of the first breweries open in Buffalo compared to what there is right now. So,
how did you even know what to write on an index card, though, if you never brewed before?
Well, I mean, we still liked craft beer.
Sure.
So, but I think in the, our ideas in the early days were, sort of have something for everybody first. So, what are the styles that we feel like Buffalonians would most appreciate? And B, wanting to do something a little different. So the first part of that was we wanted to make something light and drinkable, an easy transition from, blue or whatever it was then. And then something dark, and then something hoppy. Mm-hmm. But then also, one of the earliest recipes was a beer, really what's been our most successful seasonal is this cinnamon apple amber ale. So we were hey, that's nobody. There's so many pumpkin beers. Let's try something different. Apple is the state fruit of New York, and so that was one of the first recipes we sort of thought about. Is let's try to make a beer with apples.
Wow.
So that was something completely different. Again, we'd never brewed it before. Who knew what we were doing? Even back then, we didn't know what we were doing. But that was sort of the initial ideas, and it took many revisions of this to do it right. So because of that initial thought about opening a brewery, we weren't let's brew 400 different kinds of beer. Every time we brew, we're going to brew something new. That wasn't actually our thought. We were let's try to get better at everything we do. So the first batches were they're okay, but what did we do wrong? What would we do better? I remember the first batch of the apple beer, Corey was no, we're not doing this again. This is not good. I'm no, we can fix this. And actually, like I said, it wound up being our most like popular seasonal we've ever done.
What did it taste like at first? Too
Oh
cinnamony?
God! Oh, what did it first taste like? Like everything, I think was too bitter for sure. Everything was probably like pretty oxidized.
Sure.
I remember. That's funny. So we started brewing in February, right? So like you need to brew beer, you need to chill the wort. You boil the wort and you chill it. And the faster you chill it, like the better the quality of the beer is going to be. So the first day we go brew, like we didn't have a chiller, so we just like sat it in a pile of snow, and like that is not an efficient way to chill beer. It still took hours. So like we went and got tacos, and we're like we just broke open another 6-pack. Like it goes like hours to get this beer to chill. Like there were all sorts of problems back then of things we didn't know what to do. That made the beer not very good, but. Then we started adding on, okay, we better get better at chilling. So we go about a little copper chiller or whatever it was. We added little tools to our arsenal, and, we got better and better at what we were doing. So,
Are you born and raised in Buffalo?
I am not. Originally, I grew up in New York City. Grew up in Queens. Went to UB for school. I met my future wife there who grew up in Buffalo as well. We bounced around the East Coast a little bit. And then after starting a family, like I was living in Boston before I moved back to Buffalo, and I moved back in 2006. Had a daughter. We were living in Boston, like apartment, smaller than this little room we're sitting in right now. And it's like, hey, like we're ready to start a family and settle down a little bit. She still had her family living here, so we moved to Buffalo.
Wow.
And, went from there.
What about Corey?
Corey is from Buffalo.
Okay.
His family is from Buffalo. So he's been around longer than I have.
So yeah, because I was curious about when you were doing the initial like analysis of what Buffalo has, doesn't have. I didn't know how that kind of worked out between you two. Like, was it you've seen things from an outside perspective, or he was kind of leading that ship and saying, no, man, like this has never been here.
Yeah.
Type thing. Like, how was that initial conversation?
Like you're talking about like beers to make, or just the fact that the Buffalo needed a brewery?
Both.
Both, yeah. I think it came from both. I mean, just living in Boston or growing up in New York, like I'd seen, there was more of a beer scene happening in those cities than there were in Buffalo at the time. So, I feel like my education with beer had been going on for years, really from other places. But Corey, knowing Buffalo, sort of thinking, hey, here's the potential, knowing that, Buffalo is a beer drinking town. I mean, that's not like a crazy, revolutionary, idea right there. But still, it was like, there's more room. We could put a brewery here and still do well.
Sure.
So I think it was both of us,
Where did the name come from?
Big Ditch Brewing Company. So, well, first, we did not want to name the brewery something like Buffalo something. We're like, that's just a little too, I don't know, easy or obvious. Mm-hmm. We wanted to go a little bit outside the box and think about something that meant something to our history, more so than just Buffalo something. And like unintentionally, even thinking about it at that time, what we wound up being sort of a regional idea, not just a local one. So that gives us the ability to actually expand a little bit outside of our, immediate neighborhood. So that's cool. But so we started just diving into Buffalo's history a little bit about, what are some things that really made Buffalo Buffalo, explored a few different ideas. And we actually like, you might even be able to find it if you go far enough back in our Facebook, like, timeline. Like there was probably an early poll that was like, hey, what do you think of some of these names for our brewery? We didn't even really have one yet.
Oh, okay.
And I think we put up a poll, and I think there were like 7 people that voted for Big Ditch, which was the best, winning name right there. So, so like it was a name that we liked, and we actually asked people, what do you guys think? And that was a name we wound up going with. But then exploring and learning the history, like so many great stories, from that time. And again, the Erie Canal and Big Ditch, which is, for those who don't know, that's the reference really there. Nobody ever thought it would ever get filled with water, but wound up transforming Buffalo and the rest of New York State. It's truly an amazing project and something that made Buffalo Buffalo. Mm-hmm. So, it's a good name.
How long did you and Corey know each other at the pharmaceutical company before you decided to go into business together?
Right. So I went to go work there in 2006 when I'd first moved back here, and Corey wound up coming aboard in 2007. I actually like trained Corey a little bit, and like at the time, so Corey was really like, here's the dynamic of me and Corey. So Corey's the hands-on guy. Like he gets in there and gets dirty. And there's actually another story about that relating to beer I could probably share with you about that, is how our different approaches. But so Corey was like basically a manufacturing operator. He worked in a clean room. For like 5 years, he was doing all the aseptic filling. He wound up working in the chemistry department, making batches of stuff. I was the engineer. I had an engineering degree. So me and him worked together. He'd be like, this is broken. Help me fix it. This sort of thing. So we met in 2007. And then actually I partially kind of got Corey a job. I like interviewed him and then sort of recommended him to work in this like pilot plant lab that we were working in. So we were working side by side every day for like 2 years, even before we had this idea.
That's wild. So he's more of the hands-on guy. Is that why he transitioned to being the actual brewer?
Right. So here's the little story about that. So we have the index cards, and we're like, let's go make beer. And then like on that's on a Tuesday or whatever it is, and and then on Friday he's like, I'm gonna go to the to Niagara Tradition, which is fantastic homebrew store in the area, and go buy our ingredients for making something. I'm like, okay, cool, I'll come with you. We don't know what the hell we're doing. I don't know. We go over there, and then like on Sunday, he's like calling me from he's like, okay, so I just started making beer and I don't know what to do next. Now I'm like, I'm reading How to Brew. I'm in chapter like 4 at this point, and I'm like, I haven't even got up to that section yet. I'm like, I didn't know you started already. So he's the guy that's like, he's just going to jump in and kind of like, maybe he'll figure it out or maybe he screws it up, but that's how he learns. Where I'm like, I'm going to read the book and read the whole thing and understand it before I even do anything.
Does this dynamic sound familiar at all?
Shut up, Derek.
Maybe this dynamic is common in all like great partnerships. I don't know. Someone's jumping in and someone's planning and they work together, and that's the dynamic really we have. So I run over there on a Saturday afternoon, and we were running out to go find like a spaghetti strainer so we could separate the, the wort from the. Oh yeah, we're like, I'm like, he didn't even have like a colander in his house, so I'm like, we got to go buy one of these at least. So we're doing that, like whatever. That was, it didn't turn out great again, but that was, him learning a little bit and then me learning as well. So yeah,
I love that. So you go through those growing pains, and then you get to a point where you're like, hey, we need a building.
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah.
What was that whole conversation?
Well, so, that wasn't a conversation. That was a process. So, it wasn't just like, let's go get a building. So we have this idea of making beer. And then, so we spent 6 months just, trying to learn how to make beer. And then so this is, from February 2011 for the next 6 months, whatever. So then we're like, you know what? Let's give it to our friends and family, see if they like it, and see if, we're onto something here. Now, so we had a party. This is actually in Corey's parents' house. They had a nice place we could do this. And we got everybody some food, and we served a bunch of our beer, and we had 30 to 40 people maybe come for this thing. And we had them rate the beer and little cards, tell us what you think of it. Which was your favorite? What didn't you like? That sort of thing. Now, of course, they loved it. But these are all friends and family. Of course, you're giving them free beer and free food. Of course, they're going to love it. So this wasn't super objective. But we took that and we were encouraged by that. We felt we were onto something. And then after that, this was mostly me, the analytical side of what we're doing, writing a business plan. And the purpose of that was before I jump into this, we had jobs at a pretty good, corporate jobs, corporate company, and
Safe job,
yeah, exactly. I have a family, I have kids. So I'm I'm not jumping out of this without getting an idea of what the risk is, right? So I spent 6 months writing a business plan, even worked with local SBA to get some feedback on that, put together a financial model, and I was I think this could actually work. And then after that, we spent a year with that business plan trying to find someone that would help us because we didn't have that much money, So we went up there sort of looking for business partners, say, hey, we've got a vision, we've got the talent to do this, but we need some help from the financial side. And during that whole process, we met a couple of business partners. We found this building. And then that's really when it actually really started, but that took a year just to get from there to there. And during that year, like we would do anything. So in the early days, like we'd make shirts and just show up to festivals. Be like, we don't have beer, we have shirts. And people are like, who the hell are these guys? Like showing up to festivals, selling shirts. Like, are they ever going to open? But it was just getting our name out there, trying to raise a little money, that sort of thing. We would do anything. We did tastings at a bunch of places around town just to like free beer, get your name out there, that kind of thing. And like, all that stuff kind of worked because by the time we were ready to open, like people had sort of heard of us and were sort of looking forward to seeing if we were for real or we were, just kind of BS.
Sure.
So.
What was the year time frame of that? Like just handing out T-shirts?
How long was that going on for?
Well, what was the year range that was occurring? 2000.
It was probably
12 or 13.
Yeah, 2012, like some of 2012 and probably like all of 2013. Maybe even some of 2014 a little bit.
That's crazy because social media basically became a thing in like 08-ish?
Yeah.
So you're super early on going old school with it because that's where you guys came from. Like it's so much easier nowadays to get your name out.
Yeah. So 2012, 2013, 14, I felt like, if we're talking about social media was way easier even back then to sort of get in front of people, and get a sort of a following. We had, by the time we were open, I think we had something like 12,000 followers, which is like, how'd that happen? Jeez. We had never even sold anything, You could really get your name out there and do a lot. It's a lot more sort of locked down there, but that's what we were doing. It's just all word of mouth stuff, hand to hand sort of thing, just meeting people, having people try things, getting feedback, and that's kind of how it went. But
would you do that around your work schedules?
Yes. So
what was that grind like?
Yeah, I didn't like quit my job until July 4th of 2014, and we had brewed then we wound up brewing the first batch in August.
Good way to celebrate Independence Day right there.
Exactly. I remember it. Yeah, I remember like leaving the job and like having that sort of weekend off, and right after that, I getting right into it. Actually, even this is again a little funny story is they had like a goodbye Matt party at my old job on like a Friday, and I got called. This is how cool this was. I got called from some local TV station like, hey, we want to do a story about your new place opening, and we want to do it tonight. And I'm like, fine. So I actually left. I didn't even go to my farewell party. I left my old job to put a box in my car and drove right to my new job and started work basically that night. So like there was no, like brief period of really getting ready for this. But I remember that weekend sort of being like, okay, like here it goes. And then I spent the month and a half after that, just trying to get the new brewery open with Corey. So, yeah.
So you leave your job, you outline all the risks that are present with leaving your safe job and going to the brewery. You have your financial investor. You have the money backing you. What is that first week like when you open? You said that you had 12,000 followers before you even really opened the doors. But at what point are you sitting here being like, I made the right decision? When did that really happen?
God. Oh, how long was it
right
till I
now.
decided?
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Right now. On the podcast with the Buffalo Happy Hour.
Right when I took the sip of this beer, I was like, yes, this is, I'm glad I did this. That's a great question. There, and I've mentioned this to folks all the time. Like there were actually periods of time, even those first few weeks or months, where I went to Corey and I'm like, I'm not sure like how long we're gonna be able to do this for. Like it was very slow in the beginning. Mm-hmm. I think we made probably like one batch the first 2 weeks, and I'm like, that's not really enough to like keep this thing going. So I really hope this kind of like picks up. So I would tell him like, I'm a little nervous right now. Let's hope this gets better. And then you just stuck with it, and things got a little better the month after that. And then we went into the holiday season, got a little better after that. I think we, when we first opened, we're just selling beer out for distribution. But right after that, we're like, we should open a little retail spot. So actually, we used to serve when we first opened. And I'm sort of fond of these days because things were so simple, actually. We were working a lot of hours, but still very simple. Is we would sell beer downstairs in what's our office. We didn't have a tap room or restaurant yet. It was all in construction. And we just let people come in with a little 4-tap cooler there. We'd give them free samples of anything they wanted, and we'd like sell growlers, like very little money, but just trying to sample it. And I think that even sort of helped to like get the beer out there a little bit, and we saw things grow after that, you know. So, and brought a little bit of retail money coming in the door, kept us going.
Sure.
So I still didn't really answer your question there, but it was like a, you know, it was a little while. I mean, certainly a few months after we opened, like maybe this can really be something.
Yeah.
But you know, you have a small business. There's always challenges. The tap room opens, and then that's a whole new thing after that. Trying to figure that out,
Right.
and that took a while to sort of make sure, you know, to have that make sense.
So when did Big Ditch really become like a household name? Was it a beer that took off? Because I know Hayburner is like your key beer. Was it that beer that kind of put you up into this pedestal, or was it something else?
Yeah. It's like, it's funny you asking that. Like, is Hayburner, is Big Ditch a household name? Like, I don't know. I guess I don't think about it like that. But, you know, there was a moment where, and I remember this too, I was on a rare vacation with my family. You know, I take like a week off a year, try to get away or whatever. We actually took the kids to Disney. We're in Disney. And I got a call from our sales manager. He's like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that we just got some information. Like, Hayburner is like number one in, you know, in our supermarkets right now. Best-selling craft beer in Western New York supermarkets. And I was like, holy crap. Like, I didn't never imagine that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was 2017, 2018 even.
Sure.
It took years for that to even still to happen. So that's when I started to think, geez, like we really did something amazing here. That was way above my expectation. I was just hoping to kind of make good beer and do things a little different than everybody else. I certainly never thought that it would be like maybe the best-selling craft beer in Western New York, but it was definitely Hayburner. Hayburner is by far our best-selling beer. It's about 70 to 75% of what we make. We talk about it all the time. It's the beer that everybody asks for. We've even tried to be like, hey, maybe Lowbridge might work well at your little bar or restaurant, and they'll do that for a week. Like, no, give me back the Hayburner. Like, we can't switch people even off of Hayburner.
Can you, for the people that never had it, can you describe what Hayburner is?
Hayburner, right. So Hayburner's our flagship American IPA. When we opened, we had 3 beers. We had Lowbridge, which was a golden ale. That was the light, drinkable beer. We had Excavator, which was a brown ale made with rye. That was the dark beer. And then Hayburner was the third one, the hoppy IPA. You know, at the very beginning, we still didn't really know which one would be the most successful, which is kind of funny looking back on it. But we brewed Hayburner to be like very drinkable and still a pretty good ABV. So it's 7.2%, but it's not very malty and sweet. It never was very, very bitter. Nowadays, it's probably more bitter than a lot of other like New England style IPAs that are out there, but never really, really bitter. And also, like from just the brewing process, the alcohol in that is hidden pretty well. It doesn't taste alcoholic. So, and the body's like a little bit lighter actually. So it's not very sweet. It's not very bitter. A lot of hop flavor, a little bit lighter body. Seems very drinkable. And so I think that gave it like there's some sort of magic to it where people sort of felt they could drink more than they actually could.
Sure.
And just that made it really, really, really popular. It just took off like really quickly from there. So but still by far our most popular beer.
So Lowbridge, Hayburner, and Excavator. It's interesting to talk to breweries that started kind of before the whole boom, because there's craft beer and then there's like craft beer where they're bringing out like Cheerio Sour, and it's like these crazy flavors that didn't, I don't want to say they didn't exist back then, but they weren't as mainstream. So when you started, was that like the idea is let's bring staple style beers here to start to see if they catch on?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely weren't like, we didn't come out the gate being like, we want to brew like the craziest thing we can possibly brew. We weren't afraid of inventing something new and doing something different, but we definitely weren't trying to brew really crazy styles. We just wanted to, brew some things that people hadn't typically done and just do them really well.
Sure.
But then again, like that cinnamon apple ale, which I brought up again, like that has cinnamon, brown sugar, oatmeal, allspice, and then like New York State apple cider in it. So that's a lot of like adjuncts.
Sure.
Fruited beer. It wasn't a sour. Like sours weren't really a thing yet back then. So we weren't afraid to do stuff like that. But even when our taproom opened, like we had the 3 staples. I think we had that apple beer, but we had like a black IPA. We had like a hoppy red ale, like a smoked porter. It wasn't anything super crazy. We had a Belgian like Golden Strong Ale on. There wasn't anything really, really crazy with a lot of crazy ingredients, even back then. That over time we did more and more stuff like that.
What is your reach now?
Like territory basis? Yeah.
Like how far can you guys touch?
Yeah. So like from a sales perspective, I guess our goal was always sort of to be like, let's go deep and not long. For a couple of reasons. First of all, freshness. Freshness is just super important to us. Like, I think maybe we've all been there where you buy that beer off the shelf and it's like, right away that it's old. It's been sitting there for a while. You're not happy with the brewery and, the beer or whatever. And so we really work hard to keep our stuff fresh. So because of that, we've kept it pretty close. And the second thing is, the further away you go, the less relevant you are. So we're like, let's sell as much beer as we can close to us. So we're really only distributed in New York State right now. Up until like a year ago, we're really only pretty much in Buffalo and Rochester, maybe some of the surrounding counties. Now, over the past year, we've expanded a little bit into Syracuse. We're definitely doing more there, into Albany. But we still can't buy our beer down in New York City yet, and you definitely can't buy it out of state. So maybe at one point we'll do that, but we'll take it as far as we can until, no one really cares about us anymore,
Sure.
We'll sell as much beer as we can in New York State. That's kind of what we're trying to do.
How you doing in the Southern Tier?
Pretty well. We've been selling beer there for years, and it's been one of those things again that's grown as time has gone on. So probably not as well as Southern Tier, but we do pretty well there.
I gotcha. It's interesting because when you're in places like Olean, they have 4 Mile Brewing, and then Southern Tier and Southern Tier Distilling is all down there, and it's like they have a compound. But it's interesting too because when you talk to locals, and then you bring up different breweries from the city.
Right.
It's like, wow, that's such an interesting dynamic. You're like, dude, it's a 40-minute drive.
Yeah.
But to them, it's like it's this unicorn.
Yep.
And it's basically their New York City. And it's just really cool to hear that distinction. And they're like, yeah, it's up there. It's like, wow, that's wild. Especially when you're from here. You know what I mean? Like, it's just such a different dynamic. So that's why I asked.
It is.
No.
Especially like, I grew up in New York City.
Right.
So like an hour travel anywhere was really no big deal
it's like
when
a
I
block
was
for
a
you,
kid. Yeah. I used to take the train 45 minutes to school every day when I was in high school. I don't think I had many friends that didn't live, like much closer than an hour from me.
Right.
It was always like a travel. So it's kind of funny in Western New York, that's the way it is. But still, it's not that far, so people do get out here, and we do pretty well in terms of sales there.
That's awesome.
So you have your bottle shop or your kind of storefront that you're doing the taps out of with the growler, and then you open up your tasting room. At what point did your restaurant come? Because I think that when you look at Big Ditch, it's not just a brewery anymore. It's kind of more of like a restaurant brewery combo. Because your dishes are more elegant than what you normally find at a normal brewery. So can you talk us through that whole process?
Food here is so good, dude.
It is fantastic.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's funny about that. So, yeah, from the moment that we opened our tap room, that we were serving food.
There's laws for that, right? Like, don't you have to?
There were actually back then. It's a little different now because you've got like farm breweries and the rules have loosened up a little bit. But back then, it was sort of like if you wanted to serve beer by the pint, you had to serve food.
Okay.
So we already knew we had to serve food. And then, this building was kind of like, we could have done anything with it, but it was available. So really we kind of took the space that we had this idea about doing food, and we're like, okay, let's, it's going to want to be a restaurant, And, one thing about this location is that I knew that the medical campus was getting built and expanding. I'm like, you got, I don't know how many thousands of people, 15,000 people a mile away. That was a good sign. Mm-hmm. And then we saw Tapo, which is right across the street, had just announced they were opening. I'm like, okay, there's people like coming here. This little corridor here, maybe it could be a thing. So that gave us sort of the confidence to like take over a little more space and try to do like a food concept. But still, for me in the early days, I just want the food to be good enough to keep people in their seats sort of drinking the beer. There wasn't a very high expectation in my mind of what I wanted the food to be. But I think when you looked at the space that we had and sort of how things went, and just like, we had a little bit of interest and buzz, we got, some really qualified people wanting to work for us. So our original GM, John, he had 20 years of experience in background in restaurants. Our original kitchen manager, Mike, or chef, same thing. And like they put together a concept that like was certainly exceeded our expectations. From the very moment I tasted the food, I'm like, this is actually going to be way better than I ever thought it was. Like these guys are working hard to create something interesting. And that's what they did, I think. And I think also at that time, there, maybe wasn't a high expectation of the kind of food you can get from a brewery. So people didn't think of like even treating this place as a place to go for dinner. Mm-hmm. But it certainly grew into that, and we kept sort of investing in that, and we did more with the food, and we do beer dinners, and we were, trying to pair things and continually tweaking that. And I think the food program just got better and better and better here. The other thing that was interesting, because we have such a pretty large space, is we had requests for private events before we were even open. I mean, we did a wedding here before we were open, which is
an actual wedding?
An actual wedding. The ceremony and the reception in this building. They looked at the place when it was a pile of rubble, and they're like, we'll take it, which is crazy. Like it was amazing that they could do that. So we had our like interest in private events even before we were open. And with those private events, you're going to have to do food, right? Mm-hmm. So that also made us staff the kitchen a certain way and make sure the food is a certain quality. You're doing a wedding, like it can't be crap. It's gotta
and
be
the size
decent.
of the kitchen too, right? Like, is your kitchen large?
It's funny. Again, another thing is like the kitchen was built to a pretty good size, but in all truthfulness, like the amount of business we do in our tap room is about 4 times what we thought it was going to be when we first built it. Sure. So it's a decent sized kitchen, but was pretty quickly we learned it was undersized. Mm-hmm. We did about a year and a half into it, 2 years into it. We expanded the kitchen a little bit, built a bigger cooler. Added like a couple more fryers, little prep station, an office back there. So I don't like for what we do. It's probably we get by, mm-hmm. but like I wouldn't say like it's a large kitchen for what we do. We could definitely use some more space, but we do pretty well with it. That's for sure. Yeah.
You mentioned 2 things in that answer, which I found super interesting. The first was you wanted the food good enough to keep people in their seats. And it reminded me of the old school bar motto and like how VFWs go about it, where it's like beer's priority. So like eat some pretzels, like keep the salt down, and then that'll make you thirsty. So I snickered at that. But the second thing you said that I found interesting was you mentioned the medical campus you knew was coming in, and then you saw Tapo open. Is there a thing where when you're a business owner in the city of Buffalo, when you do like a market analysis, can you ask or lean on the city and say like, what the hell is going on around us? Like, can you ask that question to see what's in the pipeline? What, like, are there other permits pulled so that you can kind of strategically position yourself based off of what you know is going to happen in the future? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think, again, like I said, we touch base with our local SBA to try to get some feedback on like business plan and how things would work. We didn't like really consult with the city too much in terms of like, do you think is there going to be more development here? What's being done to improve downtown? Mm-hmm. So like it wasn't all that detailed or structured. I should add, too, that one of our partners is Paul Iskolo. He owns Iskolo Development. So he had actually owned this building before we moved into it. So we had a developer working with us, and he was sort of seeing downtown growing as well, too, and thought, again, that there could be some potential around this sort of Ellicott corridor. So we had a little bit of help, well, maybe a lot of help in that regard as well, too.
Understood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How many taps do you have downstairs?
We have 4 tap towers, let's say, with 12 taps. Downstairs at the main bar, because we have 2 for 12, so we could do as many as 24 different beers. We never do that many. We're usually keeping it because I like to, again, keep things fresh mm-hmm. and new. We're hoping that if someone comes to Big Ditch, every time they come, they could try something different.
Sure.
So we're trying to keep things moving. So it's usually, tap list is around 12, maybe gets as high as 14, 15, as low as maybe 8 or 10, but usually around 12.
Do you do anything with like hard alcohol, like liquor and anything like that?
Yep. There's another thing that we right from the beginning, we were doing the math around it, and like to do a liquor license. I mean, liquor licenses aren't cheap. For every bar, you need a liquor license.
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing the math even early. Like, I wonder if like we're going to make back our investment in this liquor license. And very quickly we learned that we would. So, I mean, it was like maybe a week or a month or something like that where we made that investment back into the license. So, you know, like, why did we do that? I think we were like, look, I mean, we want to make this a place for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got a big group coming here and 6 people like beer and 1 person doesn't, or maybe can't drink beer. They have some options. So we had like cider on from the beginning, a few wines and liquor. And that program has definitely grown over time. So you can come to Big Ditch, and if you don't like beer, you still got food, you've got wine, you've got liquor, we've got cocktails, custom cocktails, all sorts of stuff you can find. So I guess that, you know, again, leans a little more into the restaurant thing, but it's just like, you know, you own a business, you want to give something to everybody. You know, I'm not trying to really exclude anybody. If you want to come here and enjoy it and you don't like beer, we still have something for you.
I love that when he was like, we did the math. And I immediately thought of us. Where it's just like, you did the math, and I'm leaning over your shoulder like, did you carry the 2? Because I don't know anything about what's going on. Like, I'll just plan.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Well, again, like you know, you can step and misstep at any way along this thing. So, like, I mean, you know, probably cost we put that in for liquor license, probably $10,000 at the beginning. That's a lot of money.
It's absurd.
That's a lot of money for a new business.
And that's not the federal side either.
No, that's just like state, like just your permit to sell liquor.
It's a
you know,
mess.
it was a lot. But yeah, I mean, it was a good decision.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you get any, like, what are your hours? Are you getting any of like the downtown Chippewa action at all, or are you closed for that?
More good stories. There's so many good stories. Like, everything you say, I'm like, there's a time. I mean, which again, you started with OG. Like, I'm feeling very old right now because I have a story for everything. But
yeah, we're literally about to reference Chippewa.
So,
well, you're so close.
So again, early days, 2015 or whatever, 2016, we were open and wanted to be something to everybody. We have liquor. We were serving shots. And very quickly, and like, well, first of all, we weren't open till 4. We were like, we'll close at midnight. So like, this isn't, you know, you want to go till 4. There's other places you can go, but we're going to close at midnight. But still, like, we're serving shots. So we had folks, you know, sort of wander here and doing shots, and like, it got messy in the early days. A little bit. I think still, like, craft beer was newer to Buffalo. So you're like, hey, I can go drink 3 or 4 Hayburners. Like, that's, you know, you're going to do that slowly, not quickly. So like we after a little bit of that, like, we kind of shut that down. We're like, no, that's not what we're trying to do. There's places for that, but you know, we try to make it a little more family friendly. You know, come here and have a beer or a few beers. Yeah. But you know, there's other places to go, kind of, you know, go get hammered kind of thing. You know, so that's kind of where we kind of drew the line.
So when you said that you had events here and you had that wedding wanting to come before you even started, which was wild to me. I'm literally almost getting married, and I'm panicking over the fact that you would look at this and it would be rubble. You'd be like, I want to get married here.
They believed in it, yeah.
That's wild. So when did you create these rooms? Because right now we're in the Titanic room. You have the beer room. You have the upstairs. So like, when did that segmentation come in?
Right. So let me think about that. So the building before we moved in, right now there's an upstairs and a downstairs, and that was obviously already here. But there used to be a ceiling between those two, and our developer partner who owns a building cut away that ceiling to open it up. So that was great. And then out of that, we're like, okay, we'll build an upstairs and a downstairs, give you 2 different perspectives, different place to sit. And like, even we thought maybe the upstairs would barely even be used, except for maybe on like a weekend, or like, you know, maybe we'll use it on the weekend. Who knows? But we're going to build it out so we can do stuff like that. And again, right away, it was full. And there started to get requests for these events. So it wasn't only a few months after that till we actually hired like an events manager to try to like in the beginning I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I mean, I like, to make sure this is clear, I had no restaurant experience whatsoever.
I want to make sure I'm clear
before I did this.
Is the food warm?
Yeah, like maybe that's already clear, and I'm stating the obvious. Like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, but I had no restaurant experience, so I was kind of just like, hey man, whatever works. So like, people are like, can you price up this event? I'm like, I don't know how the hell to do this at all.
Yeah.
So very quickly we figured out, like, okay, we need to hire somebody to do that, and then that actually helped to grow it as well too. So we had the upstairs, and then we built out this little room, which just happened to be here, and said, hey, maybe we could turn this into a little thing. And then finally the beer hall was again like a pile of rubble for like a year. We stuck like a little, our little 4-tap cooler we had in the office. We stuck that back there. We still had people doing stuff. And then after doing that, we invested to like upgrade that, build a bar back there, put some bathrooms, and put some nice like a little privacy there, and that helped to grow that as well. So I mean, again, like people were asking us before we did it. We weren't like we're gonna be an event space. It's just like kind of just happened, But it's a big part of what we do. I love having all the events here, and we've done some really amazing events here. So.
That's got to be really surreal, just sitting here and recounting all this and being like, this happened because people were asking for it before we even offered it. Like, that's just a weird experience that I feel like most business owners don't have the luxury of saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. Buffalo supports local. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure that's true everywhere to some point, but Buffalo just supports their own. We love things that are Buffalo. I always thought, again, so I didn't grow up here, so maybe I'm a little bit of an outsider, and I hope this doesn't like offend anybody too much. But I always thought of Buffalo as almost like an underdog town. It's like everybody wants to root for the underdog, right? You're still seeing that, like with almost like with the Bills right now, like we're the favorites for the first time. Like I feel like in a really long time. It's a weird feeling for Buffalo. We're used to being the underdogs, right?
We don't like it either. We don't like being the favorites.
I know it's kind of scary. You're like, okay, it's not quite comfortable yet, So. I think when something is positive, then Buffalo builds on that. I know that like some of the feedback we got right from when our tap room opened was, and again, I think people meant it as a compliment a little bit. Like this doesn't feel like Buffalo a little bit. They felt it like raised Buffalo up a little bit. And this was sort of the top of the pyramid goals for us is like we wanted people to come here and be like, this is maybe not just a great place for Buffalo, but maybe almost like a world-class institution, world-class place to get beer. And you're like, Buffalo's pretty cool, actually. It's got lots of great stuff. And if we could just be a little part of that, we felt we were doing good for Buffalo. So, we try to invest in Buffalo that way, and they invested back in us. So, yeah, pretty cool.
It's interesting you say that because I remember the first time I came here, and I literally looked around, and I was like, this is here? That was my exact thought, and I said that out loud, and I was just blown away. I was like, wow, this is actually in Buffalo, because you don't see it here. Yep. That's also why I love that point of other business owners that are local. They travel, and then they bring what they've seen somewhere else to Buffalo just to enhance it, because the age-old saying is that we're 5 years behind with, like, everything. Like, women here wear Uggs. Men wear cargo shorts. Like, that's not anywhere else except in Buffalo because we're behind. So it's an awesome point that you brought that up, but it's so true. And now – because remember back then, that whole industrial look, like exposed HVAC wasn't a thing. And then all of a sudden it's like, why is that there? And it's like, it's industrial. It's like, okay. It's like, oh, okay. It's rustic.
Now it has to be a thing. Right?
Yeah.
You go to a brewery, you're going to see that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, now it's everywhere. It's really cool, though, that you guys like fully embraced something that was essentially progressive at that point, because like no one's done that yet.
Yeah.
So what now? Like you've been here. You guys are savages in the industry. Like you're not going anywhere. You have a good solid foundation. So what are you trying to do moving forward?
Right. So our big challenge really, well, let's take it back to like 2019. Okay. Our challenge at that time was we were growing really quickly, and our brewery was really at capacity. So we were finding interest in our beer. Just in between Buffalo and Rochester, their demand was higher than what we could even make.
What's your capacity?
So
what barrel system are you at?
The capacity. So we have a 20-barrel brewery. That's what we started with.
Capacity of 20.
Well, no, that's the brewing system, and then I should have taken our capacity. Oh, sorry. I think of our capacity as sort of like what we can make in the course of a year. So we wound up going to like a 3-shift operation, brewing 5 days a week, 24 hours a day to try to max out the capacity.
Oh my God.
So yeah, we did that in 2016 when we expanded to Rochester, and we're like, okay, we think we're going to need, we're not going to be able to do it on 2 shifts even. We need a 3rd shift to do that. We had folks that were, nice enough to be able to do that. Like one of our R&D brewer now is our R&D manager. He basically started a 3rd shift and worked on that shift for, far too long actually. But our capacity that we can make out of that brewery here is 15,000 barrels. We made like 14,600 or something in 2019.
Oh, Jesus.
So we got really good at operating, with like almost no mistakes. So a lot of training, documentation, super efficiency. I mean, Corey had a ton to do with that too. Again, Corey being like the operations efficiency expert, run around doing a million things. We just totally nailed it to do that. So, and then by 2020, we sort of announced the idea to open a new brewery. And we finally, in 2022, did that. We opened a production brewery just a few blocks away from here that gives us another 20,000 barrels of production capacity. So now what we're doing is just figuring how to, everything's brand new for us and just trying to figure out how to maximize that. So, we've got new products, we're in new markets, and just trying to figure it out.
So you're going to be brewing in both locations or just over there?
Yep. No, we brew... So we do all of our 12-ounce canning. Most of our production is 12-ounce cans. So we do all of that there. That's a 40-barrel brewery with like a canning line that's about twice as fast as the one we have here. And then here we're at Huron Street, we're doing all of our basically drafts and also innovation. Mm-hmm. So the brewers here are sort of like R&D brewers. They're still brewing Hayburner, draft, and a couple other little things. But they're tasked with coming up with new and exciting things, beer and even beyond beer. Let's try anything. There's no bad ideas. Let's see if we can develop them, put them out there, and see what people think. So that's fun. We had very little time to just have fun and experiment and try new things, being so full at capacity. Mm-hmm. So now we get to have a little fun with it and try some wild things. We get some time to think.
Sure.
So that's nice.
So I'm just processing this now. You started on a 20-barrel system. That's what. Why? How? Because we've talked to so many breweries in the area, and all of them are 2-barrel, 5-barrel, 7-barrel was the biggest. But you started on 20. So coming from not knowing how to brew beer and going in 20 barrels, were you just we're going to succeed? There's no other option.
He had 12,000 followers going in. All right.
I don't think the 12,000 followers didn't tell us how to brew beer. That wasn't the answer to that. But I don't think that was too related. But I should say, me and Corey were working at a pilot lab, scaling up small scale formulations to large scale formulations. Mm-hmm. That was our job. We both had I have a chemical engineering degree. So in order to do this, we had the good biology, chemistry, science background that we could be successful with it. Now financially, that doesn't mean it was a good decision. So like I said, after the first month, I was I don't know if this is going to work out, but we had the room to do it. And the difference between a 10-barrel system and a 20-barrel system is not twice as much.
Sure.
So, and actually, in our investigation and meeting other brewers and talking with other folks, there was we went up to see Good Nature Brewery. I remember this. They're in Hamilton, New York, and they had grown really fast. They started in a 2 and went to a 7, and then it went to a 15. And I remember those guys telling us buy the biggest system you can afford. And we walked away from that saying, well, this is the biggest system we can afford. Let's see what happens. So we basically invested in success. But you're right. I mean, it could have gone south. We could have. If we had a few more months like that first month, then maybe it wouldn't have worked. And who knows? Maybe we would have closed early. Who knows? It was a risk, but that risk paid off because we didn't have to knock down our brewery and start all over. The other thing I want to say is when we built the brewery, we tried to build it for long term. We weren't planning for what we would do in the next year. We're let's try to make sure we have the room to grow. So we were planning for success for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's
do you have
awesome.
the largest barrel system in Buffalo now? With
Let's
60 barrels now?
So, we have a 20-barrel brewery and a 40-barrel brewery. Right. So 2 different systems.
What does Flying Bison have? Because theirs is gigunda. So is Resurgence.
I would think that either Thin Man or Resurgence are close to us. I know 12 Gates has a 30-barrel. I feel like Resurgence might have a 30 or 35, but I don't know what Rudy has over a Thin Man. If he's... and I think he has a 3-vessel or 4-vessel system. So I think he's probably capable of making a lot more beer than we are in terms of the brewing system he has. But I'm not sure if he has a 40-barrel or not.
That's wild, though. That's a lot of beer.
That's a lot of fluids just going everywhere. There's so much cleaning involved in that.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a lot of Hayburner.
It's a lot of Hayburner.
It's a lot of Hayburner. Yep. That's when I used to do brewery tours downstairs. I'd be this whole thing is filled with Hayburner, and this will last a week.
That's insane.
Do you ever get not mad, but guys, try something else. Like, do you ever get like that?
Oh, come on. Of course he does.
Well, he's drinking it right now, so I don't know if he really
I'm drinking
does.
Hayburner.
Oh, Hayburner.
I'm stepping it down a little bit for the interview. This is an interview beer. There's a post-interview beer. They don't have a Hayburner. But, I'm not going to say mad, but, craft beer has evolved a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's the right word. There's a lot of IPAs, right? And I think there are times. Look, I appreciated craft beer because of diversity. So I like being able to walk in a brewery and try 10 different things, and learning about Belgian beers or sours or lagers, whatever it is. And I think some of that has gotten a little lost over time, where people are really stuck on just a few styles, and I do wish that folks would venture out a little bit and try some other stuff. We've tried to think of what's the second best beer behind Hayburner that could even be a nice compliment to Hayburner, but there's nothing like it. We're never going to come up with anything that's going to do better for us than Hayburner. So but I can't be mad at that.
Right?
People want what they want, and I'm really glad they love it. I'm humbled by how much they love it. So, I'm not going to be mad about that.
So when you bring out new beers, do you announce it on social media? Like, what is your, I guess, marketing process now?
Right. It depends what it is. So, we've averaged something for the first several years, we averaged a new beer every 2 weeks. And then we stepped it up a lot during COVID and the shutdown, because we had time, and we're there's no restaurant, and we weren't selling beer to restaurants, so we have time to do new things. So, and people wanted anything new at that time. Anything new was good when you were stuck at home, for months and months. So then we stepped it up a little bit. So it's maybe every week and a half we do something new right now, and we're still trying to ramp that up. But a lot of times it's social media, but it depends what it is. We've done a little more than that when it necessitates. So,
Sure.
For instance, this isn't really a new beer, but we started putting Hayburner in 12 packs. Once we opened this new brewery, the first thing we did was Hayburner 12 packs. People have been asking us for this for years. So that we did a billboard, a little more advertising, around that. Some bigger display programs and that sort of thing. But, mostly it's social media. We don't do a lot of advertising. We're more fans of, I'd say, public relations,
Sure.
which is getting out there and putting it in your face, give it a try and see what you think.
So why did you stick with 12-ounce cans and not go to 16 ounce? Because it seems like 16 ounces, I'm not agreeing with it, but 16 ounces is the new craze.
Yep. It's not really even new. 16-ounce cans have a pretty long history, but I think when Hetty Topper was in 16-ounce cans, then people started to really embrace IPAs in cans. It's really because of sales. I think 16-ounce cans are for the craft beer enthusiasts. They know that cool new craft beers are in 16-ounce cans, but we've never tried to exclude just regular beer drinkers who want to experiment with craft. And a 12-ounce can is a little more. You get a little more for your money, a little more affordable, and not as just specialty as a 16-ounce can. You get 6 of them. Do the math there. Okay, I'd rather have 6 than 4. So, that's kind of why we tried that. It was definitely something we thought a lot about. But again, I think it was the right decision because, like I said, Hayburner's become the most popular beer in Western New York.
It's a hell of a lot easier to ship, too, right?
The
palletization, LTL, freight, everything.
Shipments, because you take the 4-packs or the 6-packs and you put them in trays and you palletize those trays. So it's shipping wise not too much.
Okay.
A little bit, but it's a lot easier to stack them and display them. So if you have your 16-ounce 4-pack and the little pack tech rings, they go to the store. They all got to be oriented the right way and all this sort of thing. It's hard to stack them. We put ours in little boxes. They make great little display packages. They're easy to carry and walk out with. They look good from every angle, and that was one of the things that made us want to do that. Is this is going to look good like that.
Yeah,
sure.
So, and that helped, I think.
So you started the new production facility. Is there ever any thought of starting a new tasting room in Rochester or Syracuse or anything like that, or no?
There's definitely a thought.
Yeah.
Yes. This was the first most necessary step that we spent sort of years trying to figure out because the brewery capacity was such an issue for us. There were things we just couldn't do or markets we couldn't satisfy because of that. So now that we've got that done, we're already sort of thinking, well, what's next? And we've got some ideas. I think there are definitely some places I wouldn't mind bringing our taproom experience to that we sell a lot of beer in already. So
Sure.
We'll see if that happens. But
Yeah.
a few steps between there and here, but it's definitely been talked about.
Absolutely. So where can people follow your progress on social media?
Social media. I mean, we're on all the big social media programs. We're on Facebook, Twitter at Big Ditch Brewing, Instagram at Big Ditch Brewing. For our website, www.bigditchbrewing.com. And pretty much we're going to say whatever we got to say, and somewhere between all those platforms.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. Your beer is fantastic. If you haven't come by, at least try Hayburner. You have to. But try something else, please, because all of that other stuff's delicious. I was drinking an Oktoberfest. You were drinking a coffee stout.
Crushed
and
it.
Matt was drinking the Dayburner. So is that just like a play on Hayburner?
Yeah, I mean, Hayburner, so the one knock on Hayburner, a little bit of a knock on Hayburner. Well, it's whether the high BV is a good thing or a bad thing, you could probably argue over. But, you don't always want to drink, again, a full six-pack of 7.2% IPAs. So we're like, well, why don't we do something a little lighter that has all the great hoppy flavor, but, not as strong. So Dayburner is 4.9%. I'm going on 47 years old, actually, so I've been drinking 7% IPAs, getting a little beyond me too, so I'll drink a lot more Dayburners than I'll drink Hayburners, actually. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate
thank you guys.
it.
Appreciate you having me. It's been awesome.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.